ever noticed that the more you explain your life to others, the less peace you feel inside? It's almost as if every detail you share scatters a part of your inner strength into the world. Silence is not emptiness. It is storage, conservation, and refinement of your personal energy. And once you see this clearly, you realize not everything needs to be told, and not every moment deserves an audience. Silence protects energy. Many people do not realize how much of their life force is scattered in the simple act of speaking. Every word requires breath, and every breath carries with it a part of your vitality. When you speak without purpose, you are spending energy in the same way someone spends coins on things they do not need. At the end of the day, they wonder why their pocket feels empty. The same is true for your inner reserves. When you share every detail of your day, when you explain every thought to whoever will listen, you leak energy drop by drop until what remains is a tired version of yourself. In this world, energy is the most valuable currency. It determines the quality of your health, the clarity of your decisions, and the presence you bring into every relationship. To protect energy is to protect your essence. Silence is not simply the absence of words, it is the guardian of strength. In relationships, this principle becomes even more powerful. Imagine two people in conversation. One speaks constantly, pouring out complaints, stories, gossip, and trivial details. The other listens patiently, but slowly their presence fades. The bond between them weakens, not because of malice, but because endless words create noise instead of connection. Relationships do not grow on the sheer volume of what is spoken. They grow on the weight of meaning carried within a few words. Have you ever sat with someone who hardly speaks, yet their silence feels heavy, like it demands attention? That is the energy of someone who does not waste words. Their silence carries more weight than another person's endless chatter. Protecting your energy through silence makes you magnetic. People are drawn to those who do not scatter themselves in all directions. They want to lean in, to understand the mystery, to earn the privilege of hearing what such a person chooses to share. There is also a physiological truth here. The nervous system is deeply affected by the way we speak. Every outburst, every unnecessary complaint keeps the body in a state of agitation. The heart beats faster, the muscles tense, the breath grows shallow. Over time, this becomes a habit. The body begins to live in constant noise, both inside and outside. But when you practice silence, you invite the parasympathetic nervous system, the state of rest and restoration, to become dominant. Your heartbeat slows, your breath deepens, your body relaxes. This is why silence is so refreshing. It is not passive, it is medicine. Protecting energy is not just a philosophical idea, it is a biological necessity. Not every ear deserves your story. This teaching may feel uncomfortable at first because we are conditioned to believe that sharing makes us closer to others. And it can, but only when the listener has the capacity to hold what we give. Many people listen not to understand, but to respond, to judge, or to compare with their own lives. When you share your story with such ears, you often end up feeling misunderstood or even betrayed, not because your story was unworthy, but because the listener was unready. The truth is, some ears are not prepared to hear your depth. They can only handle fragments, and when you offer them your whole, they break it into pieces that no longer resemble you. Relationships are profoundly shaped by this awareness. Intimacy is not built by telling everything to everyone. It is built by choosing wisely who receives your words. A marriage, for example, thrives not because both partners share every trivial detail of their day, but because they know when to share the truth that matters. The right story, told at the right moment, becomes a bridge. The wrong story, told to the wrong ear, becomes a wall. Even among friends, this principle applies. You may have noticed how telling a personal dream or plan too early can result in discouragement, not because your dream is weak, but because the listener projects their own limitations onto you. A person who does not believe in themselves cannot believe in you, and when you share too freely, you invite those limitations into your inner space. This is why wisdom teaches discretion. Every seed does not belong in every soil. Some soils are dry, some are rocky, some will choke the seed before it has the chance to grow. Your words are seeds. Your stories are seeds. To scatter them everywhere is to waste them. To choose carefully where you plant them is to give them a chance to flourish. And so you begin to understand the value of your story increases not when everyone knows it, but when only the right people are entrusted with it. There is a psychological dimension as well. Oversharing often arises from the hidden desire for validation. People tell their stories to hear the echo of approval. But when approval does not come, disappointment follows. This cycle keeps them dependent on the opinions of others, always needing confirmation, never feeling enough within themselves. By holding back, by recognizing that not every ear deserves your story, you shift your center of gravity inward. You no longer measure the worth of your experiences by how others react. You measure it by the strength it gave you, by the lessons you learned, by the peace it brings you now. Private growth is strong growth. Consider a tree. Its roots grow in darkness, beneath the soil where no one can see. They expand silently, without applause, without recognition. Yet it is the roots, unseen and uncelebrated, that determine how strong the tree will become when the storms arrive. If roots were forced to grow on the surface, exposed to everyone's eyes, they would dry out, weaken, and the tree would fall. The same is true for your inner growth. Not everything is meant to be shown while it is still developing. When you speak too early about your growth, your plans, your changes, you expose them to winds of doubt and criticism before they are strong enough to withstand. In relationships, private growth creates stability. Imagine a person who is constantly announcing every small change they make. Every diet, every new habit, every resolution. At first, others may be supportive, but over time, the repeated announcements without consistent results lead to distrust. Partners, friends, and family begin to see the words as empty promises. The person themselves may lose motivation because speaking about growth creates a false sense of accomplishment. Research in psychology even supports this. People who talk about their goals publicly often feel a premature satisfaction, as if the act of speaking were equal to the act of doing. In reality, it drains the motivation to complete the task. This is why private growth is stronger. It allows actions to build quietly so that when results appear, they are undeniable. There is also a sacred quality to privacy. When you allow yourself to grow in silence, you protect the fragile stages of transformation. Think of a caterpillar inside its cocoon. The process is vulnerable, hidden from the world. If you were to break the cocoon open too soon to show others what is happening, the transformation would be destroyed. Human growth is the same. Certain shifts in the mind, in the heart, in the spirit must remain protected until they are complete. Then, when you emerge, your presence speaks for itself. No explanation is necessary. People feel the change, they sense the stability, and they are inspired not by your words, but by your being. Physiologically, private growth gives the nervous system time to adjust. Change requires new neural pathways, new habits, new rhythms in the body. These need repetition, stability, and patience. When you announce change before it is embodied, you invite stress. The body feels pressured to perform for the audience you have created, even if that audience is only a few friends or colleagues. This pressure disrupts the natural rhythm of growth. But when you keep growth private, your body learns at its own pace, without external demand. The change becomes sustainable, rooted deeply like the hidden roots of the tree. The beauty of private growth is that it transforms relationships in subtle but profound ways. You do not need to convince others you are changing. They feel it in how you listen, how you respond, how you carry yourself. Your silence becomes evidence. Your restraint becomes proof. People respect what is shown through consistency rather than explained through words. In this way, private growth builds stronger trust than constant announcements ever could. When you combine these teachings, you begin to see the thread that runs through them, protecting your energy through silence, choosing carefully who receives your story, and allowing your growth to remain private until it matures. These are not separate lessons. They are three facets of the same jewel, the art of conserving your inner strength in a world that pushes you to share everything, to post every detail, to broadcast your life in constant streams of information. These teachings stand as a reminder that true power is not in exposure, but in preservation. It is not in how much you give away, but in how wisely you choose to share. It is not in being seen at every moment, but in letting your presence reveal itself when the time is right. Every emotional outpouring has consequences that reach far beyond the moment it is expressed. Emotional leakage weakens influence in a subtle but profound way. When you constantly share every frustration, every irritation, every disappointment, you create an environment in which your feelings become consumable by others, but your power diminishes. Relationships are not built on the accumulation of grievances or the endless display of sensitivity. They are built on presence, consistency, and the ability to manage inner tides without overwhelming the other person. Imagine someone who is perpetually venting, every conversation a storm of emotion. At first, others may feel sympathy or camaraderie, but over time, they are depleted. Emotional leakage transforms connection into dependency. People are drawn not to those who release all their inner turmoil, but to those who carry it with quiet resilience, who allow their inner strength to shape the space around them without forcing others to hold it. This principle carries profound lessons for intimacy. When partners in a relationship constantly offload their anxieties onto one another, the partnership can become a revolving door of temporary relief and lingering tension. Sharing feelings is necessary, but the timing, the depth, and the manner in which they are expressed determines whether the bond is strengthened or strained. Consider the difference between speaking with the purpose of understanding and speaking with the purpose of emptying. When you speak to empty, you are asking someone else to manage your internal state, to carry what only you can hold. Over time, even the most patient listener will feel the subtle erosion of their capacity. Emotional discipline does not mean suppressing feelings. It means learning to process them, understand them, and express them in a way that nourishes connection rather than fragmenting it. Listening strengthens wisdom. In a world that prizes expression over reflection, the act of listening is often undervalued. Yet it is one of the most powerful tools for personal and relational growth. When you listen deeply, without the immediate urge to respond or judge, you create a space for observation, empathy, and insight. Consider the simple act of listening to a child recount their day. If you interrupt, correct, or provide advice too quickly, you deny them the validation of being truly heard. If you listen fully, your presence alone becomes a powerful tool of teaching, guiding them toward understanding themselves. The same applies to adults. Listening is a practice of presence, and presence is the foundation of trust and respect. In relationships, listening has transformative effects. When partners listen without the need to interject, without the need to impose their own narrative, the conversation becomes a bridge rather than a battleground. Listening allows you to perceive the emotions beneath the words, the subtle cues that reveal a deeper truth. In romantic partnerships, this skill can turn minor disagreements into opportunities for growth. Two people may argue over a trivial issue, yet beneath the surface lies fear, longing, or unspoken expectation. Listening carefully enables you to uncover what is truly at stake, and responding with awareness transforms tension into connection. This is why silence, when paired with listening, is not absence, it is active presence. It is the quiet gravity that allows relationships to center themselves in mutual understanding rather than scattered reaction. The body remembers everything. Physiologically, our experiences are encoded not only in memory, but also in posture, muscle tension, and neural patterns. Trauma, stress, joy, and love leave traces in the body that manifest in unconscious behavior. When we fail to regulate our emotions or communicate indiscriminately, these physiological patterns are reinforced, often in ways that hinder relationships and personal growth. A person who has habitually vented anger may notice tight shoulders, clenched jaws, or shallow breathing without realizing that these are physical echoes of unresolved emotional habits. Another who practices restraint, processes emotions internally, and communicates thoughtfully develops a body that reflects calm, confidence, and centeredness. Others respond to this energy even before words are spoken. The subtle alignment of breath, posture, and expression communicates more than any story ever could. This awareness is critical in intimate relationships. Partners unconsciously mirror each other's energy, a phenomenon studied extensively in psychology and neuroscience. If one partner is chronically reactive, the other may unconsciously adapt tension, defensiveness, or avoidance. Conversely, when one practices calm, emotional discipline, and mindful expression, the physiological cues signal safety and stability, inviting reciprocity. This is why learning to regulate the body is inseparable from learning to regulate emotions and speech. Emotional connection is not built solely on words, it is built on the congruence between internal experience and outward expression. When your body remembers peace, your relationships feel anchored. When your body remembers turbulence, even careful speech cannot prevent subtle friction from emerging. Silence, listening, and bodily awareness intersect in practical life strategies. Imagine a moment of conflict where words might inflame and deepen the rift. By observing the body's reactions, taking a measured pause, and choosing the timing and tone of speech, influence is preserved and understanding is amplified. The ability to navigate conflict without leakage is a skill that transforms ordinary relationships into spaces of trust and growth. Beyond conflict, these practices shape everyday interactions. Listening attentively in conversation, observing the physical cues of those around you, and allowing your own presence to carry authority and calm without need for constant verbal assertion creates a relational environment where clarity, respect, and mutual support flourish naturally. Consider the story of two colleagues in a tense meeting. One feels wronged and wants to voice every grievance immediately. The other listens, regulates breath, observes posture, and speaks with measured clarity when the moment is appropriate. The latter does not dominate the room with words, but shapes it through presence, subtle influence, and understanding. After the meeting, both have been heard, but only one has reinforced their inner authority. This principle applies in every relational sphere, from professional partnerships to familial bonds, friendships, and romantic intimacy. Emotional discipline and strategic expression ensure that influence is sustained and relationships are nourished. Listening and presence are also practices in personal evolution. Every interaction is an opportunity to refine emotional intelligence, to understand patterns in oneself and others, and to deepen resilience. When you cultivate the ability to remain quiet, to listen fully, and to sense the physiological and emotional rhythms in others, you acquire a rare power, the power to understand without controlling, to guide without commanding, and to connect without demanding. Real influence emerges from the harmony of mind, body, and energy. It is not the loudest voice, the most persistent argument, or the most dramatic display that shapes outcomes. It is the calm, observant presence that holds steady, senses shifts, and responds with intentionality. Life provides countless examples of emotional leakage and its consequences. A parent who overshares personal disappointments with a child inadvertently teaches dependency and emotional instability. A manager who vents frustrations in front of their team diminishes respect and undermines authority. Even friendships can suffer when one person dominates conversations with constant personal turmoil. On the contrary, consider individuals who cultivate patience, who regulate emotions internally, and who speak selectively. They command attention, earn respect, and maintain the integrity of their energy. People are drawn to them not because they are unfeeling, but because they are fully present, fully conscious, and fully capable of carrying their inner world with grace. These principles are not abstract. They can be applied through tangible practices. Begin by observing moments when you feel the urge to react impulsively. Take a breath, notice tension in the body, and ask whether your words will serve clarity or discharge. Practice deep listening without formulating a response. Reflect on experiences privately before sharing. These acts cultivate a nervous system capable of stability, a mind capable of insight, and relationships capable of depth. With time, you notice subtle transformations. Conflicts resolve more smoothly, connections deepen effortlessly, and influence is felt even in silence. Human connections are profoundly influenced by the interplay of energy, presence, and speech. When emotional leakage is minimized, listening is maximized, and bodily awareness is cultivated, relationships enter a new dimension. Conversations become exchanges of insight rather than reactions. Moments of connection become opportunities for mutual growth, and influence becomes natural rather than imposed. The way we communicate, both verbally and through presence, shapes the very architecture of our relationships. Emotional discipline allows the heart to remain open without being depleted, the mind to engage without being reactive, and the body to signal safety without needing to dominate. Each interaction becomes a laboratory of growth, a canvas on which subtle mastery is painted not with words, but with the resonance of presence, attention, and careful expression. The body, mind, and relationships are inseparable. To cultivate one without the others is to build a house with a missing foundation. Emotional leakage weakens influence, listening strengthens wisdom, and bodily awareness preserves alignment. Together, they create the conditions in which relationships are not just functional but nourishing, interactions are not just performed but meaningful, and presence is not just perceived but deeply felt. In practice, this means that each conversation, each exchange of energy is approached with intentionality, respect, and awareness. The capacity to observe, to process, and to communicate deliberately transforms ordinary life into a continuous process of growth, influence, and deep relational connection. Self-trust is built quietly, in the spaces between words and in the moments where no one is watching. When you stop seeking validation from others, when you learn to hold your own experiences without constantly reporting them to the outside world, confidence grows naturally, steadily, like a river carving its path through rock. Many people mistake self-trust for arrogance or isolation, believing that seeking opinions or approval demonstrates humility or connection. In reality, leaning too heavily on the judgment of others undermines the foundation of your inner authority. Trusting yourself means knowing that your choices, feelings, and intuition are sufficient, that the answers you seek do not always need to come from external sources. In relationships, self-trust radiates in subtle yet unmistakable ways. A person who trusts themselves does not demand reassurance from a partner with every decision. They navigate conflict with calm, understanding that uncertainty is not weakness, and that clarity emerges from careful reflection rather than constant consultation. This principle becomes evident in everyday situations. A spouse deciding on a family matter, a friend choosing how to respond to another's distress, or a colleague determining the next step in a project, all carry weight in how self-trust manifests. When the decision is grounded in internal clarity rather than external approval, it creates stability. Others sense it immediately. There is a magnetic quality to someone who operates from self-trust. People are drawn not to the anxiety of uncertainty, but to the calm authority of assurance. Yet self-trust is not inflexible. It is informed by observation, learning, and the quiet absorption of feedback without being consumed by it. It requires patience, reflection, and the discipline to sit with your own judgment before seeking validation. Energy, like air, moves invisibly but shapes every environment. The way you carry yourself, your presence, your attention, your focus, communicates far more than your words. Your energy field teaches before your words do. In a crowded room, people instinctively feel who is grounded, who is fragmented, who carries strength, and who carries fear. This is why emotional discipline and mindfulness are so vital. Even when nothing is said, your energy creates signals. A partner sensing your calm in a tense moment may feel reassured before a word is spoken. A friend perceiving your quiet confidence may trust your guidance, even without explicit instruction. Energy is not something that can be manufactured through speech. It is cultivated through awareness of thought, emotion, and physiological state. When you hold your energy with care, when you are conscious of how your presence affects others, you create relational influence that is effortless yet profound. Consider a leader at work, one who does not dominate conversations, but radiates calm authority through posture, breath, and attentiveness. The team responds not because they have been told to, but because they sense the centered energy that commands respect naturally. The same principle applies in intimate relationships. When a partner maintains calm, even amidst disagreement, the emotional field of the relationship stabilizes. When energy is scattered through agitation, overreaction, or constant neediness, relationships mirror that chaos. Presence, more than words, is a language that communicates safety, clarity, and reliability. Relationships thrive on mystery. Humans are naturally drawn to what is not fully known, to spaces that invite curiosity and exploration. When every detail of your life is shared immediately, there is no room for discovery. Intimacy is built on layers, on trust earned through time and careful observation. A relationship that reveals itself gradually allows each partner to engage actively, to invest attention, to participate in the ongoing creation of connection. Oversharing, even with the best intentions, collapses the relational landscape into familiarity too soon. The sense of wonder and the space for mutual growth are diminished. Those who understand the power of selective sharing create relational depth by allowing curiosity to flourish, by keeping certain elements private, and by revealing themselves with intention. The psychological impact of mystery is profound. People form stronger bonds when they are invited to explore, to understand, to earn trust rather than receiving it unconditionally from the start. In long-term relationships, this principle maintains vibrancy. Partners who maintain their individual lives, thoughts, and reflections cultivate a dynamic of ongoing discovery. Instead of predictability breeding complacency, the relationship becomes a space of continuous engagement. Mystery is not deception, it is the intentional preservation of personal depth. By keeping certain thoughts, experiences, and emotions private until the right moment, you foster a relational ecosystem in which curiosity, respect, and appreciation are nourished naturally. At a physiological level, maintaining personal energy and mystery enhances relational chemistry. Neurochemistry responds to novelty and intrigue. The dopamine system, which governs reward and motivation, is activated by exploration and the unfolding of meaningful experiences. When someone reveals themselves too quickly, the neural pathways that generate engagement and interest are short-circuited. Gradual disclosure allows emotional and cognitive anticipation to develop. It is why couples who reveal themselves carefully over time often report a sustained sense of fascination and deeper emotional bonding. Mystery and energy management are not separate from psychology. They are integrated systems that support lasting relational quality. Practical application in everyday life begins with conscious observation of how much you share and when. Reflect before speaking. Will this revelation enhance understanding, deepen connection, or merely satisfy a passing impulse for recognition? Notice the responses of others, not just in words, but in subtle shifts in attention, posture, and emotional engagement. Adjust accordingly. Notice your own energy. Is it scattered, reactive, or pulled outward, seeking validation? Center yourself through breath, alignment, and intentional thought before engaging. In intimate partnerships, selective disclosure fosters both intrigue and trust. In friendships, it ensures that exchanges are meaningful rather than performative. In professional relationships, it allows presence to assert authority and influence without dominance or aggression. The interplay between self, trust, energy, and mystery creates a feedback loop that reinforces relational depth. When you trust yourself, you carry energy with authority. When you carry energy with awareness, your presence communicates confidence and calm. When you preserve a sense of mystery, relationships engage with authenticity rather than superficial familiarity. These three elements interact seamlessly. Each decision about what to share, how to show up, and what to withhold reinforces the others. Self-trust enables careful energy management. Energy awareness enhances the effect of mystery. Mystery sustains the trust and respect that self-confidence generates. Real life examples illustrate this interplay vividly. A partner who has learned to trust themselves does not broadcast insecurities, but maintains composure during a difficult conversation. Their energy signals stability, which in turn encourages the other person to respond from a calm place. Certain stories, jokes, or intimate details are revealed gradually, allowing the relationship to breathe and develop organically. A friend who maintains presence and selective disclosure becomes a confidant whose counsel is sought not out of compulsion, but out of respect. In teams, leaders who exhibit self-trust, balanced energy, and controlled disclosure inspire commitment without coercion, influence without authoritarianism. Across spheres of life, these principles apply consistently, demonstrating that relational depth is not a product of words alone, but of integrated mastery of self, energy, and presence. The subtle art of relationship begins to emerge when you understand that words, while powerful, are only one channel of communication. Presence, energy, and selective disclosure often speak more clearly than any explanation. Self-trust underpins this system. Without self-trust, energy is scattered and mystery becomes anxiety-driven concealment rather than intentional depth. Energy shapes the relational field, affecting how others respond to you before a word is even spoken. Mystery sustains curiosity, engagement, and relational vitality over time. Together, these principles create a living, breathing framework for connection, influence, and intimacy. They invite reflection, deliberate practice and ongoing refinement, transforming ordinary interaction into an arena for personal growth, relational sophistication, and enduring trust. Oversharing breeds misunderstanding, and misunderstanding is one of the quietest but most corrosive forces in relationships. When we reveal our inner world indiscriminately, our intentions are filtered through the perceptions, experiences, and biases of the listener. Each word is not merely received, it is interpreted, reinterpreted, and often distorted by the personal lens through which others perceive it. You may think that by explaining a thought, a feeling, or a decision, you are creating clarity, but the opposite frequently occurs. The more we attempt to illuminate our inner life without careful consideration of context and timing, the more room we give for misinterpretation. A casual comment shared in the absence of readiness or understanding can be twisted, and relationships that might have deepened instead encounter friction and distance. Consider the dynamics in close partnerships. One partner might reveal a vulnerability, believing that sharing it will foster empathy and connection. Yet the other partner, hearing it through the filter of their own fears or unresolved issues, responds defensively, or worse, misjudges the intent. Small cracks form in trust and communication, often unnoticed at first, gradually accumulating tension that could have been avoided had words been chosen with awareness. Misunderstandings born from oversharing are rarely about the content alone. They are about timing, emotional preparedness, and the relational energy between individuals. The same principle applies to friendships, family interactions, and even professional relationships. Oversharing invites interpretations that are not yours to control, and while you cannot prevent all misinterpretations, you can cultivate the discipline to minimize avoidable ones. Discipline of the tongue is inseparable from discipline of the mind. Words are not merely tools of communication, they are expressions of thought, emotion, and presence. The moment we regulate what we say, we begin to regulate what we think, how we feel, and how we engage with the world. Thoughtless speech is rarely harmless. Every unconsidered word carries subtle consequences, influencing the listener, altering perceptions, and subtly shifting the emotional tone of a relationship. When you cultivate mindfulness in speech, you cultivate mindfulness in thought. By pausing before speaking, you create a space where reflection, empathy, and clarity can influence your expression. This is not about repression, but about alignment. The mind and the tongue, when synchronized, produce communication that is not only clear, but generative, capable of deepening relationships rather than fracturing them. Consider a scenario in a family setting where someone responds to a moment of tension with the first words that arise. The initial reaction may feel necessary, immediate and honest, but the fallout often lingers far longer than the instant relief of speaking. Yet when another person pauses, breathes, and allows the mind to filter the intention before articulating it, the same situation transforms. Words, chosen with awareness, reduce conflict, promote understanding, and model emotional intelligence. This discipline of speech extends to all interactions. In professional settings, leaders who pause before offering feedback or reacting to provocation create climates of trust rather than anxiety. In friendships, listening before responding and speaking with deliberate intention cultivates respect, curiosity, and mutual care. Not all moments need an audience. Some experiences, feelings, and insights are sacred precisely because they are private. Oversharing can transform the intimate and the vulnerable into the ordinary, stripping experiences of their subtle power. Personal milestones, internal revelations, and emotional breakthroughs achieve their full meaning when first integrated within the self before being projected outward. Imagine a breakthrough in understanding your own fears or limitations. Sharing this prematurely may not only fail to convey the depth of the experience, but can also create unnecessary judgment or influence from others who are not prepared to receive it. Private experiences allow reflection, integration, and the strengthening of personal insight before engagement with the outside world. In relationships, selective sharing fosters authenticity. When you hold certain experiences close, you maintain a sense of groundedness that is perceptible to others. People sense authenticity not in the constant broadcast of events, but in the quiet confidence that comes from internalized understanding. Couples who respect the private aspects of each other's lives experience greater trust because boundaries are maintained and intimacy is not conflated with exposure. Friendships that honor private growth allow each person to evolve without pressure or judgment. In professional and social contexts, understanding which moments require discretion and which moments invite transparency enables relationships to deepen without becoming entangled in unnecessary complication or emotional turbulence. Emotional expression, when practiced with discipline, becomes a form of strength rather than vulnerability. Early expression is not always beneficial. Sometimes the act of waiting, observing, and reflecting produces more clarity and impact than immediate disclosure. Emotional discipline trains the nervous system, cultivates awareness, and reinforces the alignment between inner state and outward expression. The process of holding, integrating, and selectively sharing feelings transforms experiences from reactive impulses into meaningful contributions to dialogue, connection, and relational development. The relationship between words, thought, and timing is evident in daily life. In a workplace, an employee who vents frustrations without pause may alienate colleagues and undermine credibility, whereas one who pauses, considers the impact of words, and frames concerns constructively contributes to a climate of cooperation and respect. In intimate partnerships, responding impulsively to perceived slights escalates tension, whereas measured communication invites dialogue, empathy, and problem-solving. Every instance where speech is regulated and thoughtfulness governs, expression strengthens the capacity for influence, understanding, and emotional connection. Observing and practicing the discipline of the tongue is also an exercise in personal growth. It cultivates patience, resilience, and self-mastery. The process is subtle, noticing the urge to react, choosing to breathe and reflect, evaluating the potential consequences of words, and then speaking with intention. Each iteration strengthens the neural pathways associated with emotional regulation, cognitive clarity, and relational intelligence. Over time, these practices reshape interactions. The individual becomes someone whose words carry weight, whose presence commands attention, and whose relationships thrive because communication is intentional rather than impulsive. Not all experiences are meant to be shared immediately or broadly. Certain moments require solitude, reflection, or private practice. Observing which moments belong to the self and which are ready to be shared is a nuanced skill that transforms relational quality. Personal insights, emotional processing, and even mundane victories can lose potency when overshared. By holding some experiences privately, you allow for integration, reflection, and the natural alignment of internal and external states. Relationships benefit because when sharing occurs, it is purposeful, informed, and deeply resonant. Audiences engage not because they are overwhelmed with information, but because they sense meaning, intention, and care. This awareness reshapes how we view the act of communication itself. Speech is not merely about conveying information. It is an art of timing, selection, and presence. Each word is a brushstroke that paints perception, molds understanding, and shapes relational climate. Disciplined communication, practiced consistently, fosters environments where connection, trust, and clarity flourish. misunderstandings are reduced, emotional turbulence is mitigated, and the impact of sharing is amplified because it emerges from alignment rather than reaction. Relationships begin to reflect this care, evolving into networks of trust, depth, and mutual respect, where each interaction carries the potential for growth rather than conflict. Practical application involves a series of intentional habits. Pause before speaking, especially in moments of heightened emotion. Observe the listener's readiness and receptivity. Consider the necessity of sharing each detail and the purpose it serves. Reflect privately on experiences before offering them for external consideration. These practices are subtle yet transformative. They shift communication from reactive discharge to intentional expression, from potential misunderstanding to deliberate connection, from noise to clarity. The interplay between oversharing, disciplined speech, and selective audience awareness illustrates a deeper truth. Relationships are shaped as much by what is withheld as by what is revealed. Words, like energy, carry force, and their distribution impacts both internal balance and external connection. Misunderstandings, resentment, and relational fatigue often emerge not from absence of truth, but from unfiltered truth delivered without awareness. Discipline of speech aligns the inner world with the outer expression, ensuring that communication strengthens rather than diminishes influence. Recognizing which moments require privacy, which require observation, and which require deliberate expression creates relational resilience, deepens trust, and fosters environments where connection is authentic and sustainable. Pain shared without processing creates noise, and noise rarely fosters understanding, intimacy, or growth. When emotions are expressed prematurely, anger, grief, disappointment, or fear, they often emerge unrefined, unexamined, and untempered by insight. The effect is not clarity but clutter, not connection but distraction. Imagine confiding in a partner immediately after a moment of frustration, before reflecting on what triggered it or what is truly needed. The words spill out in a rush, raw and jagged, and though they may feel relieving in the instant, they can leave the listener confused, defensive, or burdened with responsibility for managing feelings that are not theirs to carry. Sharing pain before it has been processed transforms communication into a form of noise that obscures meaning and erodes relational depth. The principle extends across all forms of relationship. A parent venting unresolved stress in front of a child imparts tension rather than guidance. A colleague sharing every irritation with a peer may breed misunderstanding rather than collaboration. Even friendships can fracture when one person continuously broadcasts unresolved pain, leaving others unsure of how to respond. Human beings are not designed to absorb raw emotion without context or reflection. Processing emotions first, privately and intentionally, allows clarity to emerge. Only when pain has been understood and integrated does sharing become constructive, fostering empathy, trust, and genuine intimacy. Processing involves reflection, self-questioning, and emotional regulation. It requires observing not only the feelings themselves, but also the patterns and triggers that give rise to them. A moment of frustration may reveal deeper insecurities, unmet needs, or habitual reactions that repeat across contexts. By examining these layers privately, you gain mastery over your emotional life. When you eventually share with others, the communication is intentional rather than reactive. It carries insight and invites dialogue rather than dumping a raw load of emotion onto an unprepared audience. In relationships, this creates a new dynamic. The other person feels respected, trusted, and capable of engagement rather than overwhelmed, defensive, or drained. Wisdom in timing is the natural extension of this practice. Knowing when to speak, what to reveal, and to whom amplifies the impact of your communication. Timing is not merely about social etiquette. it is about relational resonance. Words spoken at the right moment have the power to heal, inspire, and connect. Words spoken too soon, too late, or to the wrong audience often fall flat, create tension, or generate misunderstanding. In romantic partnerships, this principle manifests when one partner chooses to pause after a conflict, allowing emotions to settle, reflection to occur, and perspective to be gained before discussing solutions. In professional contexts, this manifests when a manager waits to address a sensitive topic, observing the atmosphere and ensuring that their communication will be received with clarity and openness. Timing transforms speech from reaction into intervention, from impulse into influence. Consider a couple navigating recurring disagreements. When one partner interrupts the other with immediate reactions, the conversation escalates, misunderstandings multiply, and emotional distance grows. When the same partner pauses, observes, and waits for the moment when both parties can engage thoughtfully, even the same content can lead to resolution, understanding, and deepened trust. The art of timing is subtle but profound. It converts potential conflict into an opportunity for relational growth. Human interactions are shaped as much by pauses, breaths, and spaces as by words themselves. Each carefully chosen moment to speak demonstrates awareness, discipline, and respect for the relational field. Boundaries protect emotional intimacy by creating spaces where vulnerability can be offered safely. Without boundaries, sharing becomes indiscriminate, exposing aspects of yourself before they are ready to be received, and sometimes before you are ready to fully inhabit them yourself. Boundaries are not barriers to connection, they are frameworks that allow connection to deepen sustainably. In intimate partnerships, boundaries allow each person to explore their inner life without immediate exposure, ensuring that when vulnerability is shared, it is met with readiness and care. In friendships, boundaries maintain mutual respect, preventing emotional overreach and fostering trust. Across professional relationships, boundaries distinguish between constructive engagement and overwhelming emotional spill, ensuring interactions remain productive and respectful. The cultivation of boundaries requires awareness and practice. Begin by observing your own limits. How much of your internal world can you safely share in different contexts? Notice when sharing stems from neediness or impulse versus reflection and intention. Notice the responses of others, not as judgments, but as cues to relational energy and readiness. Boundaries are reinforced not by avoidance, but by deliberate communication, modeling self-respect and emotional responsibility. When both parties honor boundaries, intimacy deepens, trust flourishes, and interactions become spaces of mutual enrichment rather than obligation or confusion. In practice, this might look like pausing before divulging a difficult emotion, journaling experiences privately to clarify understanding before sharing them, or selectively disclosing sensitive thoughts to individuals capable of receiving them without distortion. Boundaries also involve listening with presence, discerning when another is ready for engagement and when space is necessary to maintain relational balance. By aligning self-expression with relational readiness, emotional intimacy is preserved and the depth of connection becomes resilient against misunderstanding or reactive disruption. Each interaction then becomes an exercise in relational artistry. The discipline of timing, the presence of boundaries, and the practice of internal processing converge to create meaningful exchanges. Words are no longer scattered impulsively, but are delivered with resonance. Vulnerability is no longer indiscriminate, but intentional. Emotional energy is neither depleted nor wasted, but directed purposefully to sustain engagement and mutual growth. These principles do not suppress expression, but refine it, transforming everyday communication into a dynamic interplay of insight, presence, and respect. Relationships thrive when emotional discipline is paired with deliberate timing. Patterns of reactive communication can be replaced by cycles of reflection, observation, and selective sharing. Conflicts become learning opportunities. Emotional exchanges build trust rather than tension, and intimacy evolves through mindful presence rather than unconsidered exposure. Each decision about when, how, and with whom to share strengthens relational resilience, models emotional intelligence, and fosters environments where connection is deep, authentic, and sustainable. The cultivation of these practices is both subtle and profound. It requires patience with oneself and others, the capacity to observe without immediate judgment, and the willingness to sit with discomfort until clarity emerges. Processing pain before sharing, choosing the right moment for communication, and maintaining boundaries form a triad of relational mastery that enhances every type of human connection. In doing so, individuals learn to balance honesty with discretion, presence with reflection, and intimacy with protection. Relationships, guided by these principles, transform from arenas of conflict and confusion into spaces of trust, growth, and meaningful engagement. Consider how these elements manifest in professional life. A team member who manages personal frustration privately before presenting concerns to colleagues communicates more effectively and commands respect. Leaders who wait for the optimal moment to provide feedback, taking into account timing, emotional readiness, and relational energy, foster environments of collaboration and trust rather than fear or resentment. Friendships flourish when vulnerability is shared thoughtfully, when boundaries are respected, and when timing aligns with receptivity. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to practice emotional discipline, deepen understanding, and model the integration of self-awareness with relational intelligence. In intimate relationships, the convergence of processing, timing, and boundaries creates an ecosystem where trust is earned, vulnerability is respected, and emotional intimacy is resilient. A partner who shares reflections after internal processing communicates with clarity and depth, minimizing misinterpretation and enhancing connection. Boundaries signal respect for both self and other, preventing overexposure and fostering safety. Awareness of timing ensures that conversations occur when both participants are most receptive, amplifying understanding and mutual empathy. These practices transform ordinary communication into relational art, where each word, pause, and gesture contributes to the deepening of connection rather than the erosion of trust. The alignment of internal reflection, external communication, and relational awareness illustrates a broader truth: human connections are most meaningful when shaped by conscious presence rather than reactive impulse. Pain becomes a teacher rather than a disruptor when processed thoughtfully. Speech becomes an instrument of clarity rather than noise when timed deliberately. Boundaries become bridges rather than barriers when established with respect and care. Each of these principles is interdependent, reinforcing the others to cultivate relationships that are not merely functional, but deeply enriching, resilient, and transformative. Inner awareness shapes outer connections in ways that often go unnoticed, yet the quality of your relationships is a mirror reflecting the depth of yourself. Understanding. The moment you cultivate the habit of observing your thoughts, emotions, and impulses, you begin to notice how these internal states influence your interactions. A single thought carried into a conversation, a judgment, a fear and expectation, alters tone, body language, and the way words land. When awareness is practiced, these internal currents are recognized before they become actions, and responses are chosen deliberately rather than reacted instinctively. In relationships, this creates a profound difference. Partners feel the presence of a person who is mindful, attentive, and intentional, and they respond in kind, cultivating cycles of respect, empathy, and connection. Consider a situation in a family setting where one member has been feeling overlooked. Without inner awareness, they might react through passive aggression, impatience, or withdrawal. These behaviors, though understandable, create ripples of tension that strain bonds. With awareness, however, the individual notices the feeling of neglect, recognizes its origin, and chooses how to communicate it effectively. The conversation that emerges is not driven by unprocessed emotion, but by clarity, empathy, and intention. The relational impact is vastly different rather than escalating conflict. The interaction invites understanding and growth. Awareness transforms emotional experience into a tool for connection rather than a source of disruption. This principle extends beyond immediate reactions to patterns in long-term relationships. Emotional triggers often repeat across contexts, and without attention, they can perpetuate cycles of misunderstanding and conflict. By cultivating awareness, you recognize the recurring patterns within yourself and can interrupt habitual reactions before they spiral outward. A partner who consistently feels defensive when criticized can, through self-awareness, observe the initial impulse, pause, and respond with calm articulation instead of automatic reactivity. The relational energy shifts, tension is diffused, communication becomes clearer, and trust is reinforced. Inner awareness acts as a lens that filters impulsive responses, transforming ordinary interaction into conscious engagement. Stillness nourishes authentic expression. Silence is not emptiness, but the fertile ground from which depth and clarity emerge. When the mind is quiet, unhurried, and present, authentic thoughts and feelings have space to form without distortion or exaggeration. Consider the way a musician might practice alone, allowing each note to resonate fully before performing for an audience. Emotional and relational authenticity operates in a similar way. When you cultivate stillness within, your words, gestures, and presence in relationships are no longer reactive or performative. They become reflective of genuine insight and understanding. Partners, friends, and colleagues respond differently to authenticity. They sense it immediately, and it fosters trust, respect, and intimacy. Stillness also allows observation of the relational environment. In conflict, for instance, a pause can reveal subtle cues in body language, tone, and pacing that guide more effective responses. Observing these cues without immediate verbal reaction requires patience and practice, but it yields tremendous relational dividends. A leader who notices the unspoken hesitation in a team member's expression can address concerns before they become issues. A friend who listens without immediately interjecting can validate feelings and create emotional safety. In intimate relationships, stillness cultivates presence. Your partner feels seen, not just for what is said, but for the attention and care embedded in your quiet engagement. Mastery is measured by restraint. Strength is often mistaken for dominance, volume, or outward assertiveness, yet true power is revealed in the capacity to choose when and how to act, speak, or reveal yourself. In relationships, this restraint is transformative. Impulsive reactions, oversharing, and unchecked emotions often undermine bonds, while deliberate action, selective disclosure, and disciplined communication build trust and respect. Consider someone navigating a heated discussion with a loved one. The impulse may be to react immediately with words fueled by emotion, yet choosing restraint, pausing, listening, reflecting, often leads to greater influence and deeper understanding. Restraint is not passivity, it is the conscious deployment of energy in service of harmony, clarity, and relational integrity. Real-life experiences illustrate the power of restraint in intimacy. Couples who practice measured communication during disagreements report stronger emotional bonds and reduced recurrence of conflict. Friends who withhold judgment and respond thoughtfully instead of reactively, are more likely to be sought for counsel and support. Even in professional contexts, leaders who exercise self-restraint in speech and action cultivate authority not through coercion, but through presence, consistency, and respect. Mastery is subtle. It resides in the alignment between internal discipline and external expression, in the ability to hold back impulses for the sake of relational stability, understanding, and growth. Inner awareness, stillness, and restraint converge to form a comprehensive framework for relational wisdom. Awareness enables recognition of emotional states, impulses, and patterns. Stillness provides the space for observation, reflection, and measured response. Restraint ensures that action, speech, and disclosure are deployed with intention rather than reaction. These three elements reinforce one another. Awareness informs stillness, stillness deepens restraint, and restraint consolidates awareness. In this interplay, relationships are transformed from arenas of unmanaged energy and misunderstanding into spaces of clarity, mutual respect, and authentic connection. The cultivation of these qualities requires ongoing practice and attention. Begin by observing your internal landscape during interactions. Notice tension, expectation, or impulse. Allow moments of silence to create a buffer between stimulus and response, granting space for considered action. Exercise restraint in communication, sharing only what is purposeful, necessary, or constructive. Over time, these practices become integrated, not performed, and relational interactions shift in tone and depth. Partners sense the change, friendships deepen, and professional relationships stabilize as a result of the subtle but powerful influence of disciplined presence. Consider the dynamics in parenting, where inner awareness, stillness, and restraint play critical roles. A child expressing frustration or fear often triggers immediate emotional responses in adults: anger, defensiveness, or impatience. Yet when parents cultivate awareness, they notice their own reactions before acting. Stillness allows observation of the child's behavior without distortion, creating space for empathy. Restraint guides measured responses that validate the child's feelings, while modeling emotional intelligence and self-regulation. These practices reinforce the child's sense of safety, foster trust, and cultivate relational patterns that endure into adulthood. In intimate partnerships, the same principles apply. Arguments often escalate when one or both parties act on immediate emotional impulses. Awareness allows recognition of the trigger. Stillness provides the pause necessary to assess intent and potential impact. Restraint guides the delivery of words, tone, and action in ways that prioritize understanding over winning. Over time, these practices foster relational depth, emotional security, and mutual respect. Couples learn to communicate in ways that honor both individual experience and shared connection, transforming conflict from a source of division into an opportunity for insight and intimacy. Friendships benefit similarly. The friend who observes inner emotional states, cultivates patience, and exercises restraint in communication becomes a source of support and stability. Others sense reliability and presence without the need for dramatized emotional expression. Social and professional networks experience parallel benefits. Leaders, mentors, and colleagues who embody awareness, stillness, and restraint influence environments positively, fostering trust, collaboration, and psychological safety. Influence emerges not through assertion, but through measured presence, disciplined action, and relational attunement. Each interaction becomes a laboratory of practice, an opportunity to refine these qualities. Observing one's emotional currents, pausing to reflect, and choosing expression with intention transforms ordinary moments into meaningful exercises in self-mastery and relational development. The capacity to engage with others thoughtfully, to modulate energy, and to communicate with clarity and restraint reinforces relational stability, nurtures trust, and promotes enduring connection. Life becomes a continuous opportunity to harmonize internal states with external behavior, creating relational ecosystems that support growth, understanding, and authentic intimacy. Human connections are rarely defined solely by words. Energy, presence, and the quality of attention carry equal, if not greater, weight. Awareness, stillness, and restraint ensure that these elements are cultivated consciously. Individuals who integrate these practices into daily life notice the difference. Emotional volatility diminishes, relational misunderstandings decrease, and influence is established through credibility, empathy, and authenticity rather than reaction or force. Each relationship, whether familial, romantic, friendly, or professional, reflects the internal alignment of these principles, demonstrating that self-mastery is inseparable from relational mastery. Real-world examples abound. Partners who pause to reflect before responding in conflict report higher satisfaction and longevity in relationships. Friends who listen deeply and respond with measured insight cultivate deeper bonds and enduring loyalty. Leaders who embody calm presence, strategic restraint, and relational attunement inspire trust, collaboration, and alignment within teams. Individuals practicing awareness, stillness, and restraint experience internal resilience that supports emotional regulation, decision-making, and clarity in every interaction. These qualities are not innate, they are developed through persistent attention, practice, and reflection. The convergence of inner awareness, stillness, and restraint provides a map for navigating human relationships with clarity, integrity, and purpose. Awareness illuminates the terrain of internal experience, revealing the thoughts, impulses, and patterns that shape interactions. Stillness creates the space necessary for discernment, reflection, and observation. Restraint directs action, speech, and energy in ways that preserve relational stability, enhance understanding, and foster authentic intimacy. The interplay of these qualities transforms the nature of connection, turning everyday exchanges into opportunities for personal growth, relational sophistication, and profound influence. Each relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting the presence or absence of these qualities. When cultivated consistently, they allow individuals to navigate complexity with grace, respond to challenge with clarity, and engage with others in ways that honor both self and other. Emotional turbulence diminishes, trust deepens, and communication becomes a vehicle for mutual enrichment. Awareness, stillness, and restraint operate as a dynamic triad, each reinforcing the other, each amplifying the potential for meaningful connection, authentic influence, and sustainable relational harmony. In the journey of understanding oneself and others, the path is neither quick nor linear. The practices of emotional discipline, self-trust, awareness, stillness, and restraint are not rigid rules, but tools for cultivating deeper connection, clarity, and presence. Relationships thrive not simply on the words we speak, but on the energy we carry, the timing we observe, and the depth with which we hold ourselves and others. When pain is processed thoughtfully, when sharing is intentional, and when boundaries are honored, connection becomes richer, more resilient, and profoundly authentic. Life offers constant opportunities to practice these principles, to transform ordinary interactions into spaces of insight, empathy, and mutual growth. Each moment of pause, each act of listening, each decision to hold or release words with intention builds the foundation for relationships that endure, inspire, and nurture. The power of restraint, the clarity born of inner awareness, and the depth that emerges from carefully chosen vulnerability cultivate not only harmony with others, but also alignment within oneself. Through consistent practice, the rhythm of presence, reflection, and thoughtful action becomes second nature, shaping not only the quality of relationships, but the very experience of living. The subtle mastery of emotional energy, communication, and relational awareness transforms everyday life into a tapestry of connection, understanding, and meaningful engagement, where trust, respect, and intimacy are cultivated naturally, and where every interaction becomes an opportunity to reflect the best of who we are.